To recap, we have a row here with two columns. The one that's red is 25% of the width of its container, and the other column is 75% of the width of its container. Right now, the container takes up 100% of the browser width. As I resize the browser window, the proportions will stay the same. These two are able to float side by side for two reasons. Number one, we're using the float left declaration for both columns. And then number two, the total of both columns is 100% or less. In this case, it's equal to 100%. 25% plus 75% is 100. Now, if we make it go over just by 1% or over 100% for that matter, say let's make this 76%, we're going to get something like this. They can no longer be side by side because the total of the two together would be 101%, and you'll be left with something like this. As you're creating fluid or responsive pages, make sure that you pay attention to that each row will have elements in them that when they float side by side will be 100% or less when you calculate the width altogether. Let's fix that back to how it was. And now let's add two more columns, another row below this. And we will try a different method. Instead of being so specific for each div, we can go ahead and create a grid system. Attached with the videos is a CSS file called for style CSS. In it, you will find the code that we need to add to our CSS file. Download that CSS file, copy all the code, and then paste that into your CSS. We'll put it right after column 2. What we have going on here is that we have specified 12 different possibilities for column widths. We have divided our web page to where it's in 12 columns. If something is only 12 columns, or if something is only one column wide, it represents 8.33%. We got that number by dividing 100 by 8.33. And then if something is 2 columns, then that's 16.66. If something is 3 columns, that's 25%, and so on. All the way to when something is going to take up the entire width, 12 columns, that's 100%. And then this class equals, and then the attribute. This type of selector is a way to capture a whole bunch, or I should say more than one column or more than one class that we're trying to add a declaration or so to. In this case, we are looking for a class selector that has the word COL or that has the character COL dash. Well, these 12 selectors right here correspond with that. These are classes because they start with a dot, and they have the character COL dash. So for all of these class selectors here, instead of having to put in float left and whatever else declarations individually, we can just put that here in this one spot, this one selector. Now, all of these column selectors are also going to have the declaration float left. Now, when we're creating our second row, let's go to our HTML. We put that in the same div, except this time I could use those COL dash class selectors. Let's make this 4 columns wide. And for the next one, since we have divided it into our web page into 12 columns, we'll need the COL-8 class. 4 plus 8 equals 12, representing the whole 100%. If I were to choose 9, 10, 11, or 12, these two columns will not be side by side because together they will total more than 12 columns. Stick with 8. And I also want to apply a class, another class to each one of these for styling. Create menu for that one, and then menu 2 for the second one. Let's save that and create the styling behind dot menu. We give this a background of green. And then for menu 2, we'll give it a background of orange. Save that, and let's see if anything changes with our page preview. And nothing. Now the reason for that is because we have not specified any kind of height to these divs. And on top of that, there is no content. So between those two issues, your browser is determining that they're empty, so they have 0 pixels, and there's really no reason to add it to your div class equals row right here. So we need to add some kind of height to these two divs right here, and we can just do that by going to this selector here and adding this declaration, height 100px. Now, here's our second row. This cannot fit to the right of this blue column because it's already taking up the entire width of the browser window. This one, we've specified it to be 4 columns wide, and if you eyeball that, that's 4 out of 12, about 1/3, and then this is 8 columns wide. Together, there are 12 columns, and we've set up our grid to be 12 columns. And just like the top row right here, when we resize our browser window, the proportions are retained. They will be whatever percentages we've made them as they relate to the width of their container. Right now, the container takes up the entire width of the browser window, but we can change that. We can make it to where it's half the screen size, for example. To do that, let's go back to our HTML and put all of this into another div, and we'll call this, or we'll give it a class of parent because it's the container for all of these. Pay attention to where I added my opening and closing divs. I place div class equals row with all its contents into another div with the class parent. And now for a parent, we'll make it less than 100% of the browser window width. I said 1/2 or 50%. So let's go with that. Now, this is retaining its proportions, this is still 25% of the entire container's width. But this time we've constrained the container to where it's 50% of the browser window. And we can change that. We can make it bigger or smaller. Let's make it 60%. Now this will be 25% of the 60%. This will be 75% of the 60%. This will be 4 columns out of the 12 columns that make up this 60% width right here. From this lab activity then, we are beginning to make use of the different properties that make fluid and responsive web pages possible. This completes Lab 1. Your next step now is to create a zip file of what you created for this lab and then go to Blackboard to submit it in the right place.